All right, so now we move quickly to a extension of time. So I'm going to move an extension of time until 6 p.m. Seconded, thirded. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Phelan, welcome.
There's a spelling error on my name. E-L-A-N. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's been a long day. I'm not here to complain or moan about anything, so it's lucky you're all sitting down. So I'm here on behalf of Rodney Local Board, obviously, to support item 13, which is the indoor courts facility for local indoor courts facility for Kumeu and Huapai. We support the staff recommendations that you've got in front of you. We have a high level of support locally from the community and sports codes. The local board has allocated half its capital budget to this project, which is about $1 million. Kumeu Rackets Club, who's a major partner in this, has undertaken to contribute $2 million of their own money if we can get this across the line in the current decade. And the local board has been working on this project for 8 years. So I would encourage councillors to support the recommendations that you have in front of you, and happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful, thanks, Phelan. I think it's pretty straightforward. So I'm... Oh. Quickly, Councillor Sayers, your moment will pass.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Caught me halfway. My question is, I've heard in the community a little bit of worry about the project in terms of timing and timeframes, and you touched on about the Rackets Club there. Is that a genuine concern that I'm hearing, or is that something that's the local board's particularly worried about, or any aspects that we need to be aware of as a governing body?
I guess it is, because the OLI process, as you've probably heard today, has been a very long, convoluted one, and it's a bit of a mystery to the general public how it all works, and people disappear off and do things for months at a time and nothing's heard. And I think the Rackets Club in particular are sitting on a building which is decaying around them, and they are in a few years are going to be faced with a decision to borrow money to try and fix the building up or sell it, and obviously they'd prefer to sell it and put the money into this project. So we're sincerely hoping that the current timeline can be adhered to, and I know they are as well. So that's probably the biggest, and that is a bit of a risk, and it's been identified in this report as well. But you know, if the organisation can't get on with this, then the Rackets Club may have to make a decision, and that will mean that money is not available.
Just ask a very quick clarification. In terms of the Rackets Club being communicated back to about timelines and process by the Auckland Council, perhaps not the local board but the officers, is that happening?
I think it is, but there's just been there's long gaps between information being made available. But hopefully, if you all vote for this today, the business case will get underway and we can involve them in that process. So, yeah.
To move that we thank Phelan.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Lovely.
Yeah, thank you.
And seconded, Deputy Mayor. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Phelan. Might be reasonably straightforward. And Councillor Sayers, are you happy to move the recommendation?
I'm happy to second.
Yeah. You're happy to second, Councillor Clow. And Councillor Clow did... Oh, we should invite the staff forward. Sorry, we're just presuming it's so straightforward. No. Okay. Great. Councillor Clow.
No, I just wanted to second. I assumed the councillor from Rodney would move it.
Okay. Did you want to speak to that, Councillor Sayers?
No, not particularly, Madam Chair. Just to thank my seconder.
I think that might be a moment where I'll grab it and put the recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Well done, Rodney. Thank you, and thanks, team. Good work. And we're going to carry on the spirit of positivity and love. And we're going to move to, I was going to say Councillor Wood, but we've got, now, just going to clarify who we've got coming forward from Takapuna Devonport. So, Chair George.
We've got the two of us and we've got 3 other members here, Madam Chair.
Blimey, okay.
So we're all here. Yeah.
Well, we can have as many of you as you like, but you've still only got 5 minutes.
Sure. No, well, we haven't started yet. Haven't started yet? Right, well, and it's got good morning, but it's definitely good afternoon now, Madam Chair and councillors, Independent Maori Statutory Board members and members of the Environment and Community Committee. I've introduced our members here. I think you probably know them all. And we're here to discuss 2 matters, but I think the other one pales into the distance. It's in relation to the last, on item 19, and I don't think we'll get to that, but I'll remain here, and if you do allow me to talk briefly of that. Yeah. So this is a huge decision today for Takapuna. This is something which has been discussed at length by our communities, by the board, other stakeholders, I think it's important, firstly, to say when the Takapuna Beach Business Association were here today, there was a comment about not being able to talk to Mr. Reid, and I'll take the blame for that because I actually said if that happens, we'll be paying for it. But it's just the environment that we're in, so that's the reason for that, Madam Chair. So if you just accept that. Today we have a couple of motions there on the further on in our presentation, but I just want to say that the second motion, there's one there in relation to the actual vote on the thing. The second one relates to a 4-week stand down, so we can iron out some matters that are sitting there at the present time. So first is I just want to start with the proposed civic open space in Takapuna report. And you're aware that this has been as I said, contentious issue for the local board community this term, and for the local board has moved considerably on the issue. We now accept development of the 40 Anzac Street site, but we want a civic open space that best suits the community. We have been working collaboratively with Panuku and the community over the last year to ensure the best outcome possible. As part of ensuring the best outcome, the local board sought independent planning advice from Richard Reid and Associates to make sure the plans developed by Panuku were robust, met quality urban design outcomes, and are consistent with key council policies and plans. The advice was also to help the local board understand important matters such as shading, building heights, and technical unitary plan issues like setbacks. The advice from Richard Reid and Associates highlighted that a rectangular layout provides better outcomes than the Panuku proposal developed by Isthmus Group. We acknowledge that this layout is similar to Panuku's option 2, which was presented as an option during public consultation in 2018. The local board considered both proposals at its June business meeting and recommended to support the Richard Reid and Associates proposal as the preferred approach for the civic open space. The local board believed that the Richard Reid and Associates proposal best meets the needs of the community. Now, as chair, I did not support the Richard Reid and Associates proposal and instead support the Panuku design developed by Isthmus. From my perspective, I felt the Isthmus proposal provided a satisfactory outcome which met all the local board's priorities, for example, having good connectivity between Hurstmere and Lake Roads, links between Lake Road through to Hurstmere Green and down to the Takapuna Beach, and also through to Potters Park. So there's 2 axes, an east and a west, and a north axis that goes up to Potters Park. As you can no doubt people have looked on the reports, but there's a figure at paragraph 22 of the report, which graphically illustrates that, and that's the proposal that has been put forward by Panuku, and which is what the board agreed to. But subsequently, we've seen another plan which has kind of been changed already, which that concerns us, and the area of concern is the motion on the report B, which says refine the final boundaries of the new civic open space. Refine the boundaries, which it's been said that only a small variation, but what I've seen, it seems to be more than a small variation. So that's a real concern. So that's something which we'll see how things go, and we'll come back to that. That's why I would like the stand down time to do more once we move away from here today. Now I'll hand over to Deputy Chair Grant to talk about the Richard Reid proposal.
Kia ora, ko Grant Gillen, taku ingoa. Thank you for your patience here today. So I'm going to talk about the local board supported the Richard Reid proposal, and this is because that particular shape and location maximises access of the square to the sunshine and also recognises the community's association with the site as a market. It maximises the co-locational opportunities with Potters Park and accommodates the view to Rangitoto and fits within the existing urban structure of the metropolitan centre. The recommended dimensions for the town square by the Richard Reid's proposal are more appropriate for a metropolitan centre town square. The area of the proposal is 3,428 square metres, which is consistent with the open space provision policy of between 3,000 and 4,000 square metres for large civic space. The shading from the buildings along Hurstmere Road are only on the square for the early morning sun, and the rest of the day the buildings don't cast a shadow onto 40 Anzac Street with this proposal, and they do with the Panuku one. The size, shape and location of the civic open space will enable pedestrian access through to 40 Anzac Street, which creates connectivity and accessibility across central Takapuna. It is the same development potential as the Panuku proposal developed by ISMIS, and as we heard in the public submissions earlier today, that this proposal not only is the same or might be better, but it has a more advanced retail component around there. So we have a couple of recommendations, and we request that the committee either agree with the local board position to support the Richard Reid Associates proposal for the civic open space, or agree in principle with our position and defer for a month the approval of the proposed civic open space so that Panuku can work close with the local board to reach a more mutually agreeable position. And there are a number of reasons for that, and one of them is that some of the reports that you've got on your agenda today have never been before the board to be considered formally. The report that we did consider formally was different to the one that we saw in the workshop, and that is actually different to the one that's on the agenda here today. And also it was only on the board's agenda as an extraordinary item. So we did ask Panuku a week ago, I think it was, for a delay for a week or so to actually try and work through the issues, and that was refused. But what the board is united on is that we are not opposing the development on the square. We want a public open space, but we want one that is the best for the community. We believe the Richard Reid one is the best outcome for the community, and that the Panuku one is just more of a movement corridor. And there are some other issues that hopefully I'll get some questions on about the process and the willingness of the board to work collaboratively with Panuku to achieve a better outcome and report back for the next meeting, Madam Chair, of your committee. And so we're really only asking for a month's grace, and if the committee wants a little bit more, I mean, that's fine, but we did take on board the Business Association's comments that they don't want undue delays in this matter, and the board want it resolved as well. Thank you for your time.
Okay. No, thank you both. And we've probably got time for a couple of questions. I've got Councillor Sayers and Councillor Watson and Councillor Walker.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think they're fairly quick questions. I was formulating them. You might have answered them in part, Grant. We don't want to lose momentum on this. I hear that, and the local board's positive. The time frame I was going to ask, you mentioned 2 weeks in your presentation, say a month. So come back to this next committee meeting is what you're suggesting. Okay. So look, my main question is, are you fixed in your position, or do you think there's room that there can be compromise between the parties over that month's period?
Well, I'm hoping that there is some compromise, and there are some serious issues. And for example, and you will have on your agenda the critique of Richard Reid's proposal, and I might say the laneways have been redrawn 40% narrower, and then critiqued as being too narrow, and so there are a lot of errors in that critique. The market stalls have been placed across the service lane and Hurstmere Road. So that means every Sunday when there's to be a market, there's got to be an application for a road closure, a street market permit, traffic management plan, 9 weeks application for the permit, and so on. So there are a lot of concerns with the Panuku proposal. The shadowing, they gave us one set of diagrams with shadowing caused by the potential development, and another set that showed shadowing caused by unitary plan height development. But when you overlay the two, there's almost 100% shadowing of their design all year round. And so we feel we have been misled a lot in the process, or the process has been distorted, and we just want to get back and work collaboratively. I mean, another example, Mr. Sayers, Councillor Sayers, is that the expressions of interest went out to developers while the working group was in process, and that expressions of interest had very much the same design here in 3,000 square metres, and yet the working group was still trying to work through the site location and scale of the open space. And we just felt that we've been misled in quite a number of places in this process, which is unfortunate.
Okay.
I just hope those are quite harsh words. So I just hope positions haven't been set, Grant, and that there's a willingness to cooperate, which I think you've answered in the affirmative there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Just another question for you, Grant, if you don't mind. In amongst all this voluminous material, I don't think we've actually got a copy of the Richard Reid report. There's been a critique, but remarkably, there doesn't seem to be a copy of the actual report. So I just want to ask to make it very clear then, in your view, why have George and you and the rest of the board supported the Richard Reid report as opposed to the consultation via Panuku? So what are the key points that have led you to support Richard Reid and therefore drive these recommendations you're making to us?
Sure. So, thank you. So I suppose there's a range of issues here. One is the configuration of the space and the place for the space adequately provides for Anzac Day, the Sunday market, which is highly valued not just on the shore but for people outside the shore that come over, and the Panuku Isthmus proposal does not provide the same accommodation, and there'll be a lot fewer stalls in the wrong place, spread out, and it doesn't provide well for Anzac Day groupings and for the University Capping Parade groupings that we have as well. The lanes that are there that were criticised as being too narrow are lanes, the width of Vulcan Lane, for example, and who here thinks that Vulcan Lane doesn't work? It works wonderfully. It's, and I walked past it again this morning. and yet they were deliberately redrawn by the critique as being too narrow, and they were redrawn 40% narrow and then criticised as being too narrow. So we think if we looked at the Richard Reid proposal in a more professional way and went through it and talked about our issues, then we will be able to get a far better outcome in this. The shadowing, I think, is important, and Richard Reid has done shadowing diagrams that will show what will happen if the surrounding area was developed to the extent under the unitary plan, plus the development in the around the square, so that we actually see what not what now the shadowing could be, but what the future shadowing will be on that square. With his design, even with tall buildings, there is quite a lot of the square that still gets adequate sunshine. With the other design, when you put the two together, in the future you'll get shadowing over virtually like 90 to 100% of the square most of the year. So there are a lot of those things that I think that we can work through, and we want a square where people can gather to activate the retail edges, where people can actually enjoy sitting out there in the sun and enjoying a public open space, a civic space, and not somewhere where you just scurry from one end to the other. And that's really important in the design. But I also, probably I'll just finish up on this.
I want to have a comment on that.
Yeah, but if I might just finish. So the whole premise of the Panuku design rested on a consultation of option 1. And if you look in your reports, the tag team, Council's own tag team, says that the way that was drawn was so misleading, it was prejudicial to the process. That's the first thing. The second is, and you'll see it in that workshop, is a email from Associate Professor Grant Duncan of Massey University, who talks about the flaws and the predetermination in that consultation process. And in your agenda, Panuku say that the reason they've chosen that design is because it's come out of the consultation process. The consultation is so flawed that we should not rely on it as being the place where that civic square should be. So we need to go back and actually have a look at what's the best place for the people of the shore for the public open space, not something that's predetermined by developers' preferences.
Madam Chair, just in relation to that consultation, I mean, this was consultation. I mean, I know that we're Chair and Deputy Chair, but, you know, I don't want to denigrate the consultation to that extent. When we did have Colmar Brunton do a 500 and something survey, which came out that the proposal which has been put where Panuku's put theirs did come out. So that is, you've got to say that is the situation there, plus over 5,200 people or 5,300 people did contribute to that, to a survey, another survey which was run as well, where the same area, Panuku's one, came out. So there are merits in both of these, and you know, this study that's been done by ISMIS in relation to the Richard Reid one does have some issues in relation to the type of square it will be and the location of it. So there are issues there as well. So I think we've got to look at that, and I think that's the reason why I think a stand-down period of, say, 4 weeks so we can sort these out, some of these issues out, would be very helpful.
Have a read on that, George.
And we'll talk about that when we've got Panuku at the table. I've got Councillor Walker and Councillor Simpson. Councillor Walker.
I'd just like to give a commendation to the local board first in respect of the work that you've been associated with, first of all around Richard Reid, and then the later work that's Jan McCready, is it? And I'm not sure what association the local board has with that, but I've got a few questions. And the first one goes to the difference between the Richard Reid report and the earlier Panuku report. And really that's as it goes to the space. And I just want you to confirm something, and that is that there is a substantial difference between the two. So the Richard Reid is not a tweak of the Panuku plan. There's a substantial difference. And in particular, can you confirm that that difference amounts to a square space that is strongly associated with Potters Park and effectively has a substantial space where a significant quantity of people can gather at the same time as allowing for other people to move around? So can you confirm that significant difference?
Well, yeah, quite frankly, it is a subjective kind of call as to which is the best location.
But there's a
you've
difference.
got in the Panuku concept, you've got that east-west flow and you've got that north access. Now, if we could get some greater area where those two axes meet, I think that would be very helpful than what we have at the moment. So that's that one, and I think you've just got to look at the critique that was done on the Richard Reid concept.
So if I can ask a question around that,
Yeah.
and that goes to, sure, there's a difference between the two in terms of the square space and, if you like, the town square outcome, but as far as the commercial outcome is concerned, what Jan McCready is pointing out is you've got an alternative outcome, arguably, that is conceivably better in terms of floor plates than the Panuku plan, and that is a substantial difference. So again, what we're talking about here is not simply tweaking, but another plan that is, I would suggest, substantially different, but conceivably better.
You've had the option of seeing that
Yes.
McCready, or whatever her name is, I can't remember her name, that report, we haven't seen it, so I can't help you any further on that. And so, you know,
But I
we
think
can only present what we know at this stage.
Wayne, one of the big factors I think that's a tick in the Richard Reid proposal is that the square does not cut across the service lane, and the Isthmus proposal has the town square bisected by the service lane. In fact, it's in 3 different parts. And so every time an event has to be held, that service lane either has to be closed off or people wander across it, and that's risky and unsafe. So the one that's beside it, I think, is has got a huge safety factor. Plus, as I mentioned before, the idea of having to get a traffic TMP and a permit to close it down is quite expensive.
So my last question just goes to the process going forward, and that goes to my reading of this, and that is that both the Richard Reid report, the Jan McCready report, offer information that will be very easy for a process going forward for Panuku to engage. And by that I mean there's some work done that's highly professional, that's based around concepts and the like that go to these sorts of squares, and it's fit for purpose for a conversation going forward. Is that the case?
Yes, it is.
We're in the hands of this committee on that. I mean, we can't tell you how the committee's going to react. It's the chair's prerogative to direct the committee.
Why my wish,
And I will.
Councillor
I think that's.
Walker.
I think George's point is a very, very good one, and I think, Councillor, we've probably traversed as much of this as we can at the moment. We need to dig into this when we've got Panuku at the table and we've got the other reports in front of us. I think we're again starting to cover ground that's previously been traversed.
Sure.
I've got Councillor Simpson, then Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I've got a number of questions for Panuku, but just to you, you've asked for pretty much a month's grace, right? But you are all experienced enough to know that you will probably have to make a decision without being on your board agenda, because, you know, you sort of start writing a report 2 weeks before the board and then you've got to come back here. The papers are almost beginning to be written for our next E&C meeting, like tomorrow, right? So if they were to give you, for whatever, whatever reason, you were going to be given a month, and this meeting makes the next decision, can you give me confidence that you will either, that's it. That's it. You're either got to compromise or you're in or you're out. Because I can't see a sort of, dare I say it, open and transparent, agenda-based way if you're only asking for a month. And trust me, I don't want to give you longer than a month if I was going to give you a month. So I'm very keen to get that. I noticed in the report that the Panuku spoke to the chair and the deputy chair. So I'd kind of see an urgent workshop being held with Panuku, if this is a process, and as I said, I'm not 100% convinced it is, but if that was a process, are you happy to do it that way? Because that's the only way you will deliver on what you're offering, which is a month.
And you have my undertaking that we'll do that. If the committee is willing to put a rider in it that requires Panuku to discuss or meet in good faith and collaboration, working towards a satisfactory outcome that is, even if it's a compromise between the two ideas. What we've had in the past is there seems to be a rigidity in theirs. They'll listen to us, meet with us, go away and come back, and there's no change. And that's been disappointing. That comment that you've made there about a meeting with George and I dispute that. I really dispute that, and I was really concerned to see that on the agenda, because we did raise an issue of heights, but that was not the only or the main reason. What we raised was the fact that this diagram that you have in front of us that has got a red outline does not guarantee. So we were told by Panuku that the heights of the buildings would be low, medium and high in certain areas, that the service lanes will be there, that the arcades will be there and stuff like that. None of that appears on this report. So what they're asking you to do is agree to the red outline on that report with no guarantee of what the size of the buildings would be, so there's no guarantee on what the shadowings would be. There's no guarantee of what where the arcades will stay and what the laneways will be. So we don't know really what public access there will be around those laneways, and whether the buildings are just like one big block that stops people. And so there really has to be a commitment by Panuku to, I suppose, work with the board in a meaningful way. And I can give my assurance to this committee that I'll work and collaborate in a meaningful way and try and, convince my colleagues of the best way forward. But if the committee just says, OK, defer it for a month, come back in a month, and Panuku, come back with the same report, we are no further ahead. And that will not be a good process. But, and the slide's gone, but the slide that the board's put forward, which asked for an agreement in principle to support the Richard Reid approach, and that's in principle, so you're agreeing in principle to some of those outlines there, and come back in a month. I'm not asking you to agree carte blanche. I mean, it'd be nice, but I can count. And if there's no agreement carte blanche, just agree in principle, but some of these things really have to be incorporated into the Panuku design. And I'm really worried that the Panuku open space design contradicts the unitary plan requirement that says the buildings and development have to respond to open space. I think this open space they put forward is actually responding to developers' preferences that have already been worked through in the EOI. And it might be harsh, but I want us to work forward and if compromise, but in a meaningful way that we know that everyone's coming to the party in good faith. Okay, that's all I ask.
Right, we're taking a lot of time on this.
We have worked with Panuku, I think, in a pretty positive way since the decision was made to expedite this project. And every month we were meeting with them, and I think, if we could do that in a matter, where everybody comes to the table trying to make some advancement in this, well, I think it would be a very positive situation.
Okay, thanks, George. I've got Councillor Darby and Member Brown.
Thank you, Chair. George, can I just ask you, I was reflecting on an oral submission earlier in the day in the public input session, and a speaker said, and I noted it down, she wants a democratic outcome, and then I reflect on the democratic process that we've undertaken, and part of that was the consultation that you referred to, and also the representative survey, and neither was undertaken by Panuku. They were undertaken separately, though they have been represented as Panuku's survey and Panuku's consultation. In the consultation undertaken by our citizens engagement team, a clear majority supported a town square, and 38% chose a town square located between Hurstmere and Lake, and 8%, so 38 to 8%, supported a town square as the board majority now wants. Can you reconcile the call for democracy with the position of the board, which is at odds with the democracy in both the consultation feedback and also the Colmar Brinton poll? Can you please reconcile that? Because I cannot.
Well, democracy is a funny thing, but everybody has one vote, obviously, and that's what has been exercised when the decision was made. We did those surveys, two surveys, and simultaneously, really, and I think both of them, it's saying, the validity of them isn't as good as it should have been, but we haven't. It's just something that is being foisted upon us, I think, in recent times. And I think, unless there's some major flaw in it, I think we've probably got to go with what we've got at the moment from those surveys. The only thing that we could do would be to do another round of consultation. But we've already done that consultation over a year ago now, and I think I think we've got to stand by it.
So they've already, I think if you look at
sorry, we're not, no. The chair's answered. Councillor Darby, did you have another question?
I think the chair has answered the question quite accurately.
We can't be hearing from the whole board on these issues. Member Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to follow on. In fact, Councillor Darby almost asked my question, but I'm caught out too in the public realm this morning, in particular the last speaker of the community. He made it very clear that he had arrived to speak on behalf of the silent majority, and he quoted evidential summary of facts from the earlier work. So in a similar light, like you're sort of in a rock and a hard place because you've got, can I call it healthy? Nonetheless, you've got division, right? And it can be healthy, but there is division. Now, that gentleman, with all respect, dismissed emotions and passion and just spoke around data that he had available. Thank you for handing out the report. The question I've got for you is the Panuku recommendations, or the officials' recommendations, pretty clear on, say, some fiscal advantages around this, i.e. council-owned land. But I've just generally overlaid this plan up against the Panuku plan. Am I right in thinking that there's a need to acquire more property to achieve this plan, because they don't line up?
The council owns the property at 40 Anzac Street. That's the car park. So there's the car park at 40 Anzac Street. There's some land on Hurstmere Road, which is the connectivity between Hurstmere and the car park, which is also in this development.
Thank you. Answer my question on that. But I mean, what's your advice? Recognising healthy spirit in the community of difference, right? How do you encourage members here to see the wood through the trees if that exists.
My advice would be to give us some time to talk to Panuku over the next, as we say, 4 weeks, and see if we can come up with some compromise which will enable us to get a better product than what we're getting, what we've got there at the present time. Because, yeah, it's the area around, if you're looking at the Panuku proposal, it's the area where the two axes meet. And we want to widen that out so it's a bigger area, obviously.
I can see that.
We are covering the same ground. Now, I know another member wanted to speak. Remember, we can go into it in detail with Panuku. The debate that the local board are asking us, or the recommendation from the local board, is to find an extra month. We've heard that now 3 or 4 times. Anything else to add?
Yeah, can I just say, we're trying to get the best outcome for the community here. Both plans have merit. Both plans have negatives.
Yeah.
If you look at the Richard Reid one, it's all on one level. So it means that if you're having a capping day, or you're having an Anzac Day, or some sort of meeting there, everybody can participate. If you look at the alternative Panuku one, you've got a rise of 1.4 metres from Hurstmere Road to another level area. You cannot be part of it. It's in sections. You cannot be all part of one event going on. There are a lot of aspects. The existing laneways are accepted with the Richard Reid one. They're not in the Panuku one. We just need more time. But there's an amalgamation of the two that needs to happen.
I thought that understanding orders was 5 minutes, and you said that, and we've gone on to nearly half an hour, and I'm a bit confused about where we're at. I'm just
we're
understanding.
asking questions of the board. I'm endeavouring to keep it focused. I've got Councillor Lee still. This is still questions for local board. It was the local board who had 5 minutes. I gave them 10 because there's a pile of them. But I'm going to take Councillor Lee, and that's it. Last question. Councillor Lee.
Thank you. A 2-point question. The first one, just to sort out this issue of democracy that has been raised, before I get on to the substantive question, and it's to Chair Woods. Would you agree that if public opinion polls were a scientific measurement of democracy, Donald Trump would not be president, Brexit would not have happened, and Scott Morrison would not be the Prime Minister of Australia? Don't answer that, but I'll come on to the question that troubles me, is that the board has been united on this, but the chair has his own views now, which was somewhat different from the rest of the board. However, what you said, George, is that you have certain misgivings about the Panuku plan. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, if you look at that paragraph 22 diagram,
Yeah.
Paragraph 22 diagram, you'll see the north axis is what goes up to Potters Park. It's the northern axis, and you'll see there's where it meets Potters Park, it's got a very generous area there, 27.5 metres. Down to the right, if you look at the right, there is an angle that comes back, and as it gets back to where it meets the east-west axis, it narrows down to probably 15 metres, and that's, 15 metres, and that's the area of concern, because that's going to be the public area, and the area has diminished in size at that location. Thank you. Yeah.
This is the opposite of cutting corners. Thank you.
Right. I had said that was the last question. Very quick question, Councillor.
I've taken on board very clearly the time that you're wanting to buy on this, and I'm really trying to understand, if everyone comes to it in good faith, how we can actually achieve an outcome that's going to be great for your community. Can you just talk to me a little bit more about what I see as a regional councillor, the weighting that we should be putting on civic space and on town squares, how, given the two plans' difference, how we can cut through that? And that's the question I'm going to be putting to Panuku when the opportunity arises.
How much weighting should be put on the town square? So under the open space provision policy, Takapuna, which is a metropolitan area, has between 3,000 to 4,000 square metres as a town square. And none of these designs meet that, and we're not arguing size. So the Richard Reid one's about 3-4. The Panuku one is less, but they include the service lane in it as well. So the weighting really between the two is, I suppose, the shape more than the actual size. It's a bit of shape and location. And the importance of the shape is, and as Mike said, it's all on one level, where the Panuku one is on 2 levels and bisected by a service lane, which is quite busy, on one level, and of such a size that if we hold an event there, which again the events policy has it at up to 5,000 people, then they can, they say, for example, the Anzac
sorry, Grant, can you just get to the point, because we really do need to move this along. So they can be in one place and see the whole event as it happens, rather than being scattered around corners and they can't see it. One's a movement corridor, there's no getting away between that, it's a thoroughfare, the other's an open space. Yeah,
thank you.
Hope that.
All right, thank you. Now, Councillor Newman. Sorry, if I'm getting a little bit short-tempered, it's because I'm actually getting a little bit of vibes from the committee to move things along, and then I'm getting exactly the same bad vibes from people who still want to speak. So again, I'm going to take Councillor Newman, then we're going to thank the board.
Well, thank you, Chair. I just thought you were getting grumpy with me. So,
Good. So if you could ask the question right now. Hurry up.
Take your choice.
It was actually about the how you got on to Richard Reid himself, because I mean Richard Reid is a very good architect, and so I'm just curious as to how that relationship came to be. I think it's good. I think that it's if there was more time, is that time where Richard Reid's going to be involved in the discussions with Panuku. I'm quite interested in the report as well as the diagrams that have been circulated and the thinking around that. So could you just, any opportunity to comment?
Well, when we were getting towards the end of our discussions with Panuku, or we're getting down to the sharp end of the project in relation to the open public space, we thought that it would be really helpful if we had someone with expertise in relation to developing land in a location such as this. So Richard Reid has done work for other local boards, and that's how we got on to Richard Reid, and we then went through a process. He decided we gave him a written brief as to what we wanted, and he has had a couple of meetings with us, and the upshot is the plan that he's come up with now. So that's how that came about.
Thank you, Chairman George. That's really clear. I'm happy to move the recommendation that we thank our local board for presenting. Councillor Wayne Walker will second. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much for a very fulsome answering of the questions. So we'll now move on to invite our Panuku team to join us.
A point of order while the officers are coming up, Madam Chair. Can I just seek your clarification on something, please? I mean, and it basically goes to standing orders and conflicts of interest, certainly as enunciated in the Local Authorities Act from the Auditor General guidance to elected members. In this item, and it really goes to the integrity of the process forward here, we have had a situation before in which members have quite rightly, in my view, recused themselves from this item. We have a further situation today where I think a complaint has been made. It has come certainly to my attention and maybe to other councillors too. I've been asked to bring it up, so that's what I'm doing now. And basically it goes to a councillor who's participated in a poll, essentially online, presenting a viewpoint, voting on this item. And I just wonder if we have had any legal advice. I know in instances in the past where this is brought up, it's put over to the member to make up their own mind. But in this case, it's gone a bit beyond just words. It's an action, it's expressing a view, and of course it runs entirely contrary to non-pecuniary conflicts of interest. In particular, it's unacceptable to participate in the authority's consideration of a matter. You make statements or actions that suggest your mind is made up. So I don't know if that's been brought to your attention. I haven't named any councillors, but I just have a concern with the integrity of the process and would appreciate a view from yourself.
No, it has been brought to my notice. Advice has been sought, and considering the highly politicised nature of many of these discussions that we've held today, if you have a look at social media, if you have a look at electioneering material, there's certainly been some exceedingly strong points of view expressed on most of the issues today. The members have the right to declare conflicts as they see them, but the issue you raise, in my view and in the view of the people I've checked with, raises no issue at all.
So actually,
thank you for
actually
raising
voting
it.
in a poll does not reach that threshold in your view?
No, it doesn't.
Great. Good to have that clarified.
Chair, can I make a statement? I think the standing orders allow a statement, don't they? Good. So that it doesn't fall on all the other members here, the member is actually talking about me but failed to name me. No member has raised this with me, and not even now, because it's about direct relationship. No member of the public has raised this issue with me. It's been raised with the Chief Executive, and the Chief Executive has responded, and I saw that response. So, members, there was it's a group called, and they were represented here today, called Save the Takapuna Car Park. Save the car park. We're way beyond that. But they are still attempting to save the car park. They ran a poll. I was asked by a member of the public, was I aware that the Panuku plan was only 1,400 square metres? I said, no, that's not right. Where did you find that out? They directed me to a Facebook page, and I went to enlarge the image. What I found out yesterday is by enlarging the image, you are voting. I had no intention to vote for something that was half the area that our own resolutions of several months prior confirmed. Handle that. No for me. I don't have any conflict of interest, but thank you for raising it with me maybe yesterday or the day before, Councillor. It would have been really good to do that. The second point, I've also been accused of having a conflict of interest for being a friend of Richard Reid's. I've known Richard Reid for 20 years. I commissioned Richard Reid to do a small project for me, which is unbuilt. Not because it's not worthy, I just decided not to proceed. I want to say this because I want to get it all out. I want to say that Richard Reid has gone to my property in the north for holidays on 3 occasions. He's had dinner at my place. I'm very familiar with Richard Reid's body of work, and I'm going to leave it there. But if you have an issue with me, please come to me. I'm actually really open. I've got email. I've got phone, I've got an address, I've got an office, and I'm really human and approachable. Please come to me and open yourself to me, and you might get a response. But to do it spuriously, behind the scenes, with great drama, you won't achieve a great outcome that way.
Okay. Kia ora, Councillor Darby, and I think hopefully in the next term a little bit of person-to-person discussion around this table may heal an awful lot of stuff before it starts. I really hope that more of that happens. So, on that note, Panuku, warm welcome, and I know you've got a presentation for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Madam Chair, councillors. Myself, Kate Cumberpatch and Alan Young here from Panuku. Also like to introduce Duncan Ecob from ISMIS.
Sure.
We're here today to get the formal approval to acquire new civic space in Takapuna. This is to allow for a proposed spatial arrangement so we can progress the project into its next steps, which will include working with the local board on concept and detailed designs for the civic open space. This is just the next step in an involved process, and there are many steps still to come. This is the last decision required for this particular project at committee. All further design decisions will be with the Devonport Takapuna local board. To provide you with a brief background, including the decisions that enabled us to get us here, in March 2016, the Finance and Performance Committee approved the HLPP, High Level Project Plan. This included granting Panuku the authority to dispose of a number of council-owned properties in central Takapuna to achieve desired outcomes. The decision was subject to satisfying all statutory requirements. Panuku and the local board worked on a stakeholder engagement process to identify the visions and objectives. In April 2017, the framework plan was published, which outlined a site layout for these sites. And in August 2017, Panuku consulted on the change of use for this site. This was to enable the site to be used for purposes other than car parking. In March 2018, the Planning Committee approved the change of use with a number of conditions, one of which is to include a town square. Following that, Panuku undertook a significant level of community engagement to determine the broad location options and desired uses and activities for this new civic open space. These options were pulled together with some further design work and publicly consulted on in August 2018. A representative survey was also undertaken at the time. The public consultation and the representative survey both showed strong support for development and a new civic open space. And of these options, the support and preference to enhance the connection from Lake Road to Hurstmere Road was overwhelming. The details of all this work and the results was workshopped with the Planning Committee and the local board in late 2018. This is the general spatial arrangement for the public space. The space follows on from the outcomes, from the consultation and the many engagements we've had with the community in Takapuna. Has been refined by our design team to make the best use of the space. It fully utilises the sun that hits the site, minimises the wind factors that can affect Takapuna, and maximises the ability for the surrounding developments to activate and enhance the space. The proposal meets many needs for the project. It follows, as we've said, the representative survey and the public consultation. The Auckland Council Parks and Recreation Policy Unit has reviewed the policy against the open space provision. This policy is one for any new acquisition of space to follow for it to be accepted as an asset. The proposal has been approved as meeting this policy with a high priority for acquisition. We say acquisition, it has been acquired for park asset, is currently fee simple, it doesn't have any public space zoning or status to it. The main reasons approved as by the council unit is that the space is centrally located, of appropriate size, will complement existing civic open space in Takapuna, connects to nearby open spaces of Potters Park and Hurstmere Green, enabling pedestrian movement between spaces, enhancing the views towards Rangitoto, giving greater prominence to the Auckland landmark, and has a greater flexibility between the spaces, enhancing the legibility of them all. The proposed spatial design has also been critiqued by ISMIS when designing the space and by a group of independent design review experts. In both of these reviews, this proposal is significantly better for many of the key design principles. We'll go into these in a bit more detail soon. Further to this, the recommended proposal also respects the approved design for the Hurstmere Road streetscape upgrade, which highlights the area of Hurstmere Road adjacent to Hurstmere Green, prominent event space with greater pedestrian flow and interactions. We've selected ISMIS as the design team for the public space. The brief to ISMIS was to have at least 3,000 square metres of civic space in the location as generally shown in this area, which was selected through the consultation process. The brief has been to start with the spatial arrangement, how the public space sits within the wider precinct. Once this is confirmed, we will work on the detailed design of how the space looks, feels and is used. Just for a quick brief as well, the civic space is for meetings, socialising, play and events in Auckland's urban areas. It's meant to be structured, predominantly hard space to be used all year round and intended for meetings, socialising and events. In Takapuna there is already Hurstmere Green, which is a civic open space of 2,500 square metres. It's opposite this new space. And the Rose Garden, which is part of Potters Park, is also classified as civic space of about 500 square metres.
We've looked at best practice design research in developing the space and taken specific design drivers from Takapuna. And these set the 5 key design principles which are on the screen ahead, above us. And these were used to evaluate a number of spatial arrangements and options, with this becoming the preferred option. The space reflects the informal and relaxed character of Takapuna. It comprises of a large centrally located area that many other smaller connecting plaza spaces make strong links to the main Takapuna town centre streets, and it optimises the flow of footfall from those areas. It supports the current successful laneways running off Hurstmere Road, and they all work into this space. It acknowledges and enhances the role of Potters Park. It creates a strong relationship to Hurstmere Green and through that to Takapuna Beach. It's successful in delivering space that will encourage everyday activity with flexibility to accommodate medium-sized occasional civic events and smaller regular community events similar to the existing Sunday market. It's planned to be a warm and welcoming and safe space with high visibility from the surrounding streets. And it's predominantly edged by new development, which is under control of the council. That's everything shown in white on the image. And that will enable a control to achieve a quality and vibrant space for Takapuna. A focus for the space has been using it for events, and these diagrams show how it can be used as everyday in an event or in a full event as well, a medium-sized event. So having a space of 3,000 to 4,000 space was key for those events, such as the Anzac Memorial Services, the market or graduation ceremonies. The space does need to be a configuration that will ensure that it is comfortable for everyday use, so that it works as an everyday space that's being used by the public of Takapuna. And that it can be used for smaller events and at these times not feel too large, too unengaging and overwhelming. This space does that with the central area and contiguous plaza spaces. It allows for the everyday use, providing for respite, informal meeting and socialising opportunities, while being able to host those other sized events.
We're already using some of the space to trial and test events. Earlier this year, we demolished an old retail building on 38 Hurstmere Road. This was demolished to create a temporary public space prior to the permanent space being able to be delivered. Only half, or approximately 500 square metres of 38 Hurstmere Road is currently open for public use. This has most recently been used in collaboration with the Business Association to host the Winter Lights, as you see here. We've also worked with Youth Arts during May Music Month to paint a piano and host a number of music events in the space. These are just some of the events that we have been able to host, and only a small proportion of what will actually be the final public space.
In developing the design, we looked at a main factor of interest from the local board and the community, and that was the level of sun that would reach the space. These diagrams look at how that can occur at 3 times of the day at 4 key points of the year: the autumn equinox, winter solstice, spring equinox, and summer solstice. We've also looked at what controls we can bring in terms of building heights around the site, and that would be about having control over development around the site. So what we have looked at is requiring a lower building directly to the north of the main space, just being pointed out by Kate.
Oh, yeah, I did that.
I thought you did both. At 9 a.m. throughout the year, this space will receive a significant level of sunlight, and the new buildings to the south will be able to enjoy this sun throughout the year. At noon, the new civic space enjoys a good level of sun, even in the middle of winter. In the afternoon, the sun falls into the space adjacent to Hurstmere Road, where part of the new civic space will still enjoy sun to that late or mid-afternoon time of the winter.
So I guess next steps following this is that we will commence work on the concept design for the space. This will be in collaboration with the community, using the temporary space at 38 Hurstmere Road to trial and test the design and event ideas for the space. The concept design for this is within the local board's decision-making responsibilities, so we will continue to work closely with the local board going forward. It is also a council public space asset going forward, so we will continue to work with the council team in preparing this concept design as well. The planning and subdivision process will tick along as this continues, and in conjunction of this, we'll continue a process for procuring a development partner for the surrounding sites. 40 Anzac Street needs to close as a car park in the middle of 2020. This was following the decision with Auckland Transport to commence work on the Gasometer car park. That car park is under construction and is on track to be completed in the middle of 2020. We want to be able to be in a space where we can create this public space at that point. There is budget restrictions, there are safety issues with leaving the space as an empty, vacant lot of over 8,000 square metres during that time. So we're looking to continue that work so that we can have a space that is able to be used, work, live and play, and create as little disruption as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we want to, just before we throw it open for questions, there was very strong advocacy from the local board about waiting for another month before we moved on with this to give discussion a chance to happen. Did you want to comment on that, Kate?
Sure. We did meet. We had a workshop with the local board in June. Following that, we had a business meeting. During the workshop and the business meeting, we realised of the importance from the local board. It was at the workshop we saw the Richard Reid proposal from the board of the connection through to Potters Park. So coming into the public meeting, so the business meeting, we had increased the size of the space to open up that connection to Potters Park. We then met with the chair and the deputy, knowing that there was no other workshops or business meetings before we came to this committee meeting. At that point, we did talk about what could be done, looking at whether there was a middle ground. The idea of, I guess, of decreasing or getting rid of this building here, that was raised. The issues with not having that building is we lose a lot of the design outcomes and objectives that we're looking for. If we lose this building, we have to rely on the whole backs of these buildings on Hurstmere Road to then activate the space. And sort of there comes a point when finding a middle ground, you compromise to the point where you've compromised, and the final outcome wouldn't have been what we were looking for.
All right. So, Councillor Simpson. So we're just on questions for the moment. So, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Darby.
Okay, I've got 4 hopefully very simple questions, and it's just clarifying with you things that the local board have said. So the first thing that they said is that the consultation was prejudicial, has been judged prejudicial by the council's own TAG team. Is that correct?
There was a comment in the minutes from the technical advisory group that the consultation material wasn't to scale, that it wasn't completely accurate. It wasn't, I guess it wasn't intended to be completely accurate. The idea of the consultation was to gauge from the community what the ideas and broad location options and outcomes were desired. So the comment was there that the consultation material wasn't completely accurate, yes.
Did you refuse the Devonport Takapuna Local Board an extra 2 weeks to discuss this further? And if so, why?
We met with the chair and the deputy chair. The agenda was already coming in for this committee. At that point, there was no potential to delay coming to this committee. But I think we had also talked about what the outcomes and the compromises that could be met and what the working together was really going to mean. We have, as we've said, we've increased the space to join up to Potters Park. Sort of as my previous answer.
Okay, so is your process, i.e. the next steps part of this process, really going to achieve the results that they're asking for in, i.e. delay it for a month? Do you believe that you can have the discussions that they're asking you to have as part of your next steps and achieve any further compromise? Or is there absolutely no possibility for compromise from now on?
We feel like we have compromised as much as we can without creating a negative outcome. We would like to work with the local board. In particular, that would be better, I think, in the next steps around the concept design itself rather than the actual spatial arrangement.
My final question is, in recommendation B, there is the words refine the final boundaries. Now, if you were a bit sceptical about, and I think the local board are a bit, how can we have confidence that you're not going to refine the final boundaries so that they actually refined lesser, or, you know, you take away some of the sort of major things that the local board is asking for? Because, I mean, it's a pretty ambiguous kind of statement.
So where that delegation has been asked for is that we realise we've still got to work with the development partners in the surrounding sites. We know both from the work on the design space and in working with the development partners that the space is there's such a large sites that we need both the development partners and the public space to work to create the best end outcome. The development, we're still in the procurement process. We don't have a development partner on board at this point, so we can't, I guess we don't want to jeopardise any outcomes that could be enhanced by setting it 100% now. In terms of the intention of where the refinement could be, it's in particular around the building of 488 Lake Road. It's not owned by council. We're unsure what will be the future of that building. 488 Lake Road, also known as the Burger King building. I guess a big outcome for us is that the public spaces it could be anchored by a Burger King, and until a few months ago there was a TAB in the other part of that building. So it's trying to work out where the surrounding developments could result, and what the boundaries would be in terms of ensuring that the outcomes are still met. any change to the boundaries, we would do a full assessment as per what we've got in the report to make sure that the outcomes are not diminishing in any way.
Thank you, Chair. Kate, can you outline how you procure the services of Isthmus and how did they win that commission? What body of work or what body of work and individual projects have the, I understand David Irwin is the principal designer, I might get this wrong. Duncan, I think you're the project architect. I'd like to know what body of work the individuals and the company have not just designed but actually delivered, like that have been built. That's the question of you. And can I ask the same question of what knowledge do you have of the body of work of Richard Reid and Associates that is built, that is public domain work, squares, etc.? First question.
Thank you. The procurement process to firstly to the public market. It was advertised through I believe through Getz and other usual council systems. We then had a number of submissions come in, and we had an evaluation panel of at least 3 or 4 of us that evaluated the submissions that we received for the design work. From there, Isthmus was selected based on their track record, the personnel that was going to be on the team, as well as fees and timeframes and ability to do the work. I might pass over to Duncan to talk about experience, probably.
Thank you. Yes, Isthmus are urban designers, architects and landscape architects. They've been going for 30 years and they're a company that's 80 strong. In terms of delivering public space and projects related to public space, including buildings, we master planned and delivered Barry Curtis Park and have recently delivered changing rooms and pavilions within it. We were master planners for Hobsonville Point and delivered the Coastal Walkway, which opened recently. We have master planned and delivered the town park at Westgate, not the town square, but the town park. We worked and delivered, again, both Devonport Wharf and Marine Square at Devonport. Most recently, probably more familiar to people, is Freiburg Place in the centre of town. And at Westgate, again, we delivered Kopapaka Park, which was winner of the World Architecture Festival's Landscape Award of the Year in 2016. Another recent project that we've delivered, and again part of a 10-year master plan, has been the Kumatoto waterfront in Wellington. I am acting as urban designer on this project. Grant Bailey is acting as the lead on the landscape architecture, the public realm, the more conceptual design. He's very involved in this at the moment. Grant did lead Kopapaka Park, and as you point out, David Irwin is also the lead on the team. Yeah.
In regards to the same questions and with which Richard Reid and Associates, in terms of the procurement, Panuku didn't procure, so I can't speak to that one, and I'm not particularly aware of. I'm not aware of any details of Richard Reid's work myself. I'm not sure if anyone else would like to speak.
Two of the main projects that I know Richard's been involved in, I don't know about work he's delivered in terms of design, but I know he was involved in the Wellington. I'm trying to think what the name of the cricket ground is there that was going to have a flyover. He successfully opposed that with local members, and Yes, and he also was instrumental, I believe, in the relocation of the birdcage for the flyover through Victoria Park, ensuring that it was retained in its location.
Thanks, Chair. My question relates to the evaluation. There are two evaluations in this document. If I go to 102 of the addendum agenda, I think. No, it's the attachments. The attachments at 102. There's a summary there. And if I read through that assessment summary, the two are assessed. The first is the Panuku's project through Isthmus, where connectivity is scored 3-0 in favour of Isthmus, form and function 5-0, 2-0 in the sense of place, probably 1.5 each on comfort and safety, and then I think it's 3-2 on viability and control. As I added up, it's about 80% in favour of the Isthmus proposal, around about 42-something% on the Richard Reid. Can you tell me, how was that arrived at? Did you go through, how many times did you go before the urban design panel, which is, I think Panuku used the acronym TAG, but that's an urban design panel. How many times did Isthmus go before the panel to land on something that gets that scoring? I'm only talking about the Isthmus proposal here.
We went to TAG twice with this, but also had discussions with them outside due to the programme for delivering to this committee. And so we started off with the key principles, broke those down into main criteria within those, so there's 16 criteria within them, and then the descriptions or the attributes of what we were marking against. And then there was an internal marking on these, as well as a review with Panuku. It wasn't taken to TAG in detail. They gave an overall view on the principles and how they felt 4 options that we tested would stack up.
And lastly, questions after this final one, Madam Chair. Kate, can you tell us who was on this urban design panel? What is the makeup? What is their expertise? How qualified are they to sit in judgment over a public project like this? Refer to their summary, their evaluation on page 131 of the attachments.
So TAG is made up of 5 independent members, the same members that are part of the Auckland Urban Design Panel. In terms of TAG, there's John Hunt, Graham McIndoe, Rachel DeLambert, Gavin...
Rebecca Skidmore and...
Gavin Muller?
No, Graham Muller.
They all have technical expertise. There's landscape architecture, urban design. There's a combination of all to ensure that the expertise is looked at from all different angles.
And they're not just academics, they're involved with practices and they actually go forth and build things.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So we've got Councillor Walker, Newman, Cooper, Hills, Sayers, Cashmore, Brown and Lee, all for questions. Can I just ask that we keep the answers short and we keep the questions focused? We really do need to deal with this item tonight. Councillor Walker.
I've got a few questions. They're fairly straightforward. I'll just go through them, and I'm just generating a comparison between Richard Reid and the Panuku plan. As far as Sun is concerned, can you confirm that the Richard Reid plan is really good for Sun? And I'm looking at the analysis on page 123 compared to 102.
In regards to just Sun, yes.
Okay, that's great. As far as being able to have a number of people in a gathering, and that's a substantial number of people of the order of some thousands, in an arrangement where, you know, they're not along some rectangular grid. So this concentration, does the Richard Reid proposal meet that better than the earlier proposal? That's around the ability of a gathering of people in a consolidated space.
I would say no. It also, the proposal that we've put forward also allows for integration with Hurstmere Green as well as Potters Park. So if you are needing a very large space, you could expand it even further.
But Hurstmere Green's down a slope, isn't it? I'm talking about a situation where you've got a consolidated gathering of people. So, for example, if a bundle of people went on to Amarai, that's a consolidated group. Often it's in a, might be in a square or the like. Is the Richard Reid proposal good for that?
They are both good for that.
Okay, and as far as the relationship with Potters Park, does the Richard Reid proposal offer more engagement with Potters Park in terms of the relationship of the space? That is, more space in respect of a square relative to the engagement with the space around Potters Park?
It has more additional public space directly adjacent to Potters Park. Whether that public space would be activated and used as well is not known, not certain.
And the last question really just draws off the opinion that Jan McGready is making around the floor plates and effectively the viability of buildings. And her comment is that the floor plate design and the buildings have got some significant advantages as compared to the floor plate design in the Panuku proposal. And I just am interested in whether or not there is some merit there. I don't need a lot of detail, but is there some merit there in the floor plate design in the Richard Reid proposal?
In terms of developments, it's not as ideal. No.
Okay, and I guess the last question goes to the reason that you put up earlier around, I think, not liking the Richard Reid proposal, and that was particularly around the activation space. I think you referred to at the location in the vicinity of Potters Park. Is it not conceivable that you could have activation on the part of the existing businesses there? Wouldn't they be really interested in activating their space in that situation?
You would hope so, but it's not anything that can be assumed.
Having said that, there's a whole lot in this plan that can't be assumed.
Yeah, exactly, Councillor. I think that's fine. I think the question's been answered. Councillor Newman.
Yes, thank you. It's interesting. No, I haven't. The reason I asked about Richard Reid earlier is that I've got a particular fondness for Richard Reid, given his work to save the Basin Reserve as we know it. My questions relate to the proposed spatial arrangement for the civic space, the stuff that's in the red line. I mean, the decision today essentially carves that out, so the big stuff beyond that, well, there's no big stuff beyond that, is it? The discussion with the local board is really about the rubbish bins and where the hanging baskets go, is that correct? I mean, what would be left to go through with the local board if this decision is taken now? That's number one.
Everything to do with how the space can work. You've got how the activities that come onto the space can work, how community groups can use the space to have events, how communities can use the space in everyday use, whether the spaces are shaded or sheltered, whether there's play activities or no play activities, how the local board, how the local bus stops integrate with the space and make the most of this public space. Whether there's other community activities or groups that can be around the space. I think there is a significant amount of work still to be done that the local board can be part of.
Respectfully, oh, is that it?
Councillor Fletcher's waving arm. I'm saying she's already on the list.
Okay. I kind of feel like that's the 5% is the big stuff has been decided. So I guess what I'd want to know then, and there is a lingering concern about the sun and the shading, and about the impact of the shading given the height potential of these developments. So, what is the height potential in this area that's to be developed? Because I think that the scale of that does need to be fully understood.
There are a number of sub-precincts across Takapuna. There are 2 sub-precincts that directly relate to this site. 40 Anzac Street has a maximum height of 36.5 metres, while the properties along Hurstmere Road have a maximum height of 24.5 metres. We have worked with the spatial arrangement to ensure that we can control the buildings within 40 Anzac to have a sunny space for the public's civic space.
Just to let people know, we're just doing a bit of urgent work with our staff. We do have about 5 critical items which have to be dealt with today. We have our rain day on the 24th of July, but so councillors, we are going to have to keep going because some issues here are time critical. So I've got Councillor Cooper Hill, Sayers, Cashmore Brown, Lee, Fletcher and Filipina, and this is still questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, when the local board presented, they said that you'd met with them and nothing changed since then, but I heard you say earlier that you'd added in the Civic Square up to Potters Park after you spoke with them. Is that correct?
That was joined between the workshop and the business meeting.
Yeah, so that you have taken on board what they've said and changed it. That's what I'm trying to understand, because it's... Okay, so that is a change. One is just around currently, I want to know where currently Anzac services are held in Takapuna is on the private courtyard of the building that council lease. Is this space bigger than that?
Significantly. The temporary space on 38 Hurstmere Road that we've already opened up is bigger than the current space that's used.
Oh, right. So really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hills.
My first question is around how many times have you met with the local board or local board members on this in the last 2 years?
We had attached to the March 2018, we had a summary of all the work we'd done prior to that. There have been, since September, we've had monthly meetings with the working group. There has also been a workshop, business meeting, and the meeting with the chair and the deputy.
And when did you find out that, so the main purpose of the direction you've been moving is to respond to the public consultation which gave you a direction. When was it that you found out that the board was choosing the other design opposite to the public consultation?
We were aware that they had procured services from Richard Reid in terms of providing independent advice. We didn't realise until the Friday before the workshop on Tuesday that that came with an actual proposal.
So they gave you 1 day's business, 1 working day to respond to a completely different design?
We took it as new information. We went to the workshop to talk to the local board about the proposal that we had put forward rather than anything else at that point.
Before the decision on the change of use, how much was the public square or civic space supposed to be from the 2014 Takapuna Centre plan? What size were you aiming for, or was it supposed to be?
The framework plan followed the 2014 centre plan that utilised mostly just 38 Hurstmere Road, which is about 900 square metres, for public space.
So you've moved to 3,200. With the current Anzac Day space is what, 300 to 400 square metres that they hold Anzac Day in now?
Yes, yeah.
So this would be 10 times that size. And the pictures you've shown up there, it's hard if you haven't been there, but you know there was a lot of people in the space for the winter lights. Probably the business association says in the thousands, and that's only about 15% of what is planned to be public open space.
Yeah, that's correct. That used a little bit more around Hurstmere Road and interacting with Hurstmere Green, but it's significantly smaller than what is going to be the public space.
And the public consultation was very prescriptive. It was a Hurstmere Road to Lake Road. It was just a big kind of space. I think you've got it in one of the slides. But in response to the local board, you've actually tried to combine both designs while keeping the Hurstmere to Lake connection.
Yeah, we understood following the workshop and seeing the proposal that was put forward that the connection through to Potters Park, the local board saw that as important, and so we changed the scheme to include that into the actual public space that's intended to be kept.
And I guess we didn't really talk about it, but the Lake Road section actually has an investment from Auckland Transport of quite a large investment for a bus station upgrade, and that's where everyone sort of gets off the bus, and that's assuming why you've left that quite open on that side and connected.
Yeah, one of the biggest themes that we heard through the consultation last year was that you can get off the public transport and not realise that the beach is there, that people wanted to connect from the buses through to the beach, and also connect the two main retail areas of Takapuna being Shore City and Hurstmere Road. So those were big themes that came through in that consultation, which is where we believe that broad location was selected from.
Okay, so you've basically done everything based on the fact that 2,500 people supported the direction you guys went, whereas only about 400 to 500 supported with a. So that is the reason you did this design and went this way.
Looking at the two different options that we put forward for a town square, it was overwhelming support for the connection from Lake to Hurstmere Road. Yes.
And the two designs, just to be sure, are about the same in public space and about the same in private development.
Between us and the Richard Reid, yes, they are.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions will be very short. I've just got three. First one is, you mentioned you haven't got any development partners on board yet, I think in your presentation. So just for clarity, does that mean you haven't spoken to any developers or potential developers for Footy Anzac?
We commenced the procurement process, so we're in a procurement process with development partners. We haven't selected.
Okay, thank you for that. So if there's no development partners, do you see any insurmountable risks if we delayed for a month, as being requested by a local board? Do you see any major risks in doing that?
There is risk. There is risk because of uncertainty and questions over political support or general council support. The risk with delaying that the developers would see that as risky and withdraw.
And but they haven't been appointed yet. They just think they could observe that, right? Is that right? Okay. And just the last one's a bit of a technical question. In the diagrams that you showed, I just picked up about with the sun studies, which was being talked a lot about the shadowing. and we have got graphics of those. There seem to be the shadows shown for the buildings that will be council, but not the existing buildings. And just my impression of if those shadows were shown, that would probably give a more accurate picture of potential shadowing. So I guess my question is, wouldn't that have, what's my question in terms of perhaps why that isn't being shown on the graphics that we're seeing?
They do show the shadowing from the buildings that are there.
Okay, maybe I'm looking at the wrong diagram. Is that study number 14 there? Sorry, I'm in the supplementary page 130, Madam Chair. Because I just can't see the shadows from the grey buildings.
Yes, they're there. So if you take, for example, spring equinox at 9 a.m, you can see on what is currently 38 Hurstmere Road, you can see the shadow from the building that is currently 40 Hurstmere coming into the space.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Councillor Cashmore.
Thanks, Madam Chair. One very simple question, Kate. Thank you. The activation you spoke about with the local boards requesting that we don't allow one particular building to be built and it's the back end of the other stuff that's existing there, so I assume that's concrete block walls and downpipes or something that needs to be hidden. Could you just explain a bit more about the activation and the potential of not having that, the compromise that it would lead to?
Sure. There's between the back of those buildings and what would be the public space if we say took away that building, there is a service lane. It is a legal road. It's required to service the backs of all the properties along Hurstmere Road, done when Hurstmere Road became a main street and all the right-of-ways were taken off it. Over time, the buildings could change. Some of them in particular are looking a little bit nicer. 40th on Hurstmere has done a nice job of putting a green wall on the upper half, but they've still got car parking, for example, behind their building. Is there anything else? But largely there's a service lane and it's legally a road. That would be, I guess, the active edge of the square would be a service lane.
Service lane or
Yep.
facing building?
Yeah. No, good question. Member Brown.
Just a real quick question. Really to acknowledge the expertise of folk at the table. I have been privileged of working with ISMIS at Sir Barry Curtis Park for many years. So I'm a bit surprised that some folk are reaching out about who ISMIS are. But that aside, quick question from me is, if we brought a third planner along, would we get a third perspective?
Very likely.
And I just wanted to end with, now this is a beautiful place with a beautiful beach. So everybody be strong, nearly there.
Okay, in order response to that. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. Pre the Maunga Authority, we were trying some many years ago now to get State Highway 20 through that everybody has now taken such pride in. And Puki Tapapa was in the way. And it was Richard Reid who actually was able to provide the negotiation to let what was the equivalent of NZTA then and retain the integrity of Puki Tapapa. So for me, he carries some special weighting because of the experience that I saw in him weaving communities together to enable the right outcomes to happen. My question to you is really where the harm would be, because this is not just a one-generation project. The investment of this is going to be intergenerational, is it not? Yeah. So would there be a great harm in giving a deferral of a month to see whether or not some of these issues that we've traversed in terms of shadowing, and for me, I'm really interested in the public civic space. That's something that if you're designing good spaces for the future is really important to me. Would Panuku, because my issue isn't with ISMIS, I'm working with ISMIS on another project right now and I think they're terrific. And I think Member Brown's quite right, that you will always get all sorts of different perspectives coming up with different planners. But we have got this proposal from Richard Reid. Speaking personally, I know the outstanding contribution he's made in trying to work through differences in the past. The issue for me is with Panuku. Could Panuku actually work constructively to, along with the local boards, to see whether or not there could be some further refinement that might just get us across the line in terms of something that will be more harmonious and serve the communities well into the future?
We are always happy to work with the local board, and we have worked with the local board for years now on this project. In terms of the ability of refining the actual spatial arrangement, I'll refer to my previous response where we've opened up to Potters Park and we've looked at what differences there are left. It is that small building next to the service lane, which already is not necessarily a wonderfully feasible development. It's there to create activation and edge to that space. To remove that building, we are left with a service lane opening onto the public space. There's always wish to work with the local board and we can on the concept design. Also, I guess the other part of that question is the intention of a month. We would have an agenda to come to. I'm not sure on the agenda timelines for the August meeting, but I'm not sure that there's what the timing would be to allow any further work on that.
But if it was the will of the elected members and the members of the Independent Māori Statutory Board that we could find a few extra weeks to try and see whether there is a better, whether a consensus can be found going forward, Panuku would support it.
Of course.
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, my apologies for telling you where to shine that red light. But look, my questions are going to be based on page 75 on attachment A. And those questions are, the gentleman from Takapuna Beach Business Association mentioned the consultation that the community went through and mentioned 5,380 and 55% were for. Now, was that in August 2018? Because there's 2 Augusts in there. One was the consultation for the change of use. So was that the 2018 results?
Yes, that was 2018.
Supplementary to that, he also mentioned the Colmar Brunton Independent poll, and he said 85% preferred option 1. And is option 1 the what we've got on page 75, attachment A?
In terms of the Colmar Brunton,
Yeah.
40% selected option 1 as the preferred scheme. Another 29 were for the other options. Of the just under 5,400 for the public consultation, yes, about 50% wish for the space to be developed, and of those, option 1 was definitely the preferred.
My bad. You asked, one of the other councillors asked around what would the effect be if you put it off or there was a delay of a month, and you said there was negative outcome. Those were the two words. Is that negative outcome to the whole project that you referred to if there was a delay of a month?
Yes, there's, in terms of the project for 40 Anzac, yes, there's development process to be aware of. There's the, I guess, the upcoming, in 12 months' time, closure of 40 Anzac as a car park, and that the space needs to be used for something. Those are all risks and negative outcomes.
Chair, around August, I mean, I know that with the agenda filling up, I don't know how this could sort of go through to August. And then after that, there's the election, and there won't be a decision at all until after the election, which is a concern, which is my concern. But I put that on the table in regards to that. And I am worried about that. So, you know, I just want to, sort of put that on the table, Chair, because I think that's something we need to sort of consider. Ultimately, if this is going to be depending on the decision.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think we've probably moved into the part of the debate, and I know Councillor Watson was wanting to suggest a recommendation.
Speak to that, Madam Chair. Okay, thank you. So I've moved an amendment which I hope will go some way to meeting the concerns of everyone here. I mean, really, if you look at today, what has today been about? It's been about listening to the local boards, hasn't it? And in some cases, the local boards projects have been overwhelming. Other ones, there's been a sense of doubt, but people have gone along with it anyway. They have listened to the local boards and empowered the local boards. This is in the similar vein, or at least it should be in a similar vein, of listening to the local board, what they're saying, and making a judgment of whether it's reasonable or not. That's what it's about. And I would just remind people, if we look at this particular local board over the last few years, if we're talking about the Anzac car park site, they've really acceded to a number of demands. So in the first instance, you know, when they first came up, it was to do with the very notion of selling this site, and then they, quite rightly, some of the people amongst the board talked to the the historical antecedents to that, you know, namely in this instance that this had been paid for essentially by the local business people to provide parking. But really at the heart of their concern, and then after that, was this massive petition, which had been talk about consultation. There was a petition of 8,500 people to sign the petition to save the car park. And it wasn't save the car park, it was save the public use of this location. That was what was driving it. And that really hasn't changed. We had to intervene in November 17, a resolution from this council, not this particular committee, delayed the decision, asking the Devonport Takapuna local board to work with Panuku and the community. That proved to be, you know, somewhat less than successful if we're being honest about it. But in a short space of time, the local boards agreed to the sale. They've embraced the development. And that's in circumstances where, you know, relationships have been less than cordial. The very last step today goes to the configuration of the public square. That's the last thing they're asking for, is to be involved in that. And if you listen to the board members, which became very clear to me, their primary concern throughout this whole process has been to ensure the best possible outcome for the public realm. They said that. That is their concern. The development envelope is going to be roughly the same. The square is going to be roughly the same. So they're looking to get the absolute best outcome for this. And in these circumstances, you can see why they've gone to Richard Reid. Richard Reid, and there was some reference made to his pedigree, and it's an impressive track record if you look him up online. Clients include local and central government, iwi, community groups, private sector, and there have been a number of cases, not least of which is that park, where he's resulted in a superb outcome. That's the person that's giving their advice. And strangely enough, that advice wasn't included anywhere in all this attachments today. And that's absolutely pivotal to our decision. What is it this Richard Reid guy said? Well, if you look at what he said, and I got hold of the Takapuna Local Board, and if you put up the Takapuna Local Board and our agenda, they're light years apart. You just wonder if you're talking about the same thing. So that's a little concerning in a meeting today where there's been a lot of doubts cast over integrity of information and trust. So this, if there's one place where integrity of information and trust goes to the centre of the local board and the community, it's this development in Anzac Ave. What does Richard Reid say? Well, very briefly, he draws a concern about the shading, and we saw that in the diagrams, and particularly during the winter months where the sun disappears altogether. He's concerned about the size. The size as proposed is too small, as more of a movement corridor, and you can see that too with all the little appendages coming into the middle. So I guess the town square options don't really recognise even the civic space strategy that council has in its policy. There has been no mention of the community, the markets, the place of the markets in this this civic square. And that's a sub-regional. People come from all over to those markets. No mention of that here today. So what does Richard Reid want and the local board wants? He recommends a location, size and configuration that is in tune with the civic spaces zone and the objectives of the open space provision policy. Maximum access to sun. Well, of course. The existing urban structure of the central area reflects this community's association with the marketplace, and most importantly is the dimensions of the town squares. And he refers in that instance to Jan Gill, if that's how you pronounce his name, who's something of an authority, global leader on people and central urban design. So they're all eminently sensible and desirable outcomes. So are we going to support it or not? We've got to support the local board and those public realm improvements, or are you not? The development capacity is the same. The size of the open space is the same. Why, after today, when we have accommodated and encouraged the local boards every step of the way, along comes Takapuna, Devonport, and suddenly it's a different ballgame. So the resolutions up there support in principle those things to do with sun, open space, access, public use. They're not in question. They defer the item to allow a collaborative approach that Panuku have said to us is going to occur anyway, so that's confirming in essence what they have said. And in this rather low trust environment that has evolved, I'm not casting any aspersions on anyone, that this resolution ties down that notion of goodwill. So let's support the local board like we've supported all the other local boards for these public realms improvements. Let's give Panuku a little bit of direction to taking on board as many of these proposals that are eminently sensible and people seem to agree upon, to come a collaborative effort to come with a good outcome. Otherwise, what's the option? The option is more distrust, dissatisfaction, and a sense of not being listened to. So please support this like we have supported all the other local boards.
So you're speaking to, at this stage, speaking to the amendment by substitution.
And that's absolutely right. I'm speaking to the amendment. So I'll follow on from the comments by Councillor Watson. And I agree with those comments. My questioning established that the Richard Reid proposal has better sun. If there's one thing that's important in a town square, it's sunlight. People like to be warm. That's incredibly important. So that was established in the comparison between the tick box exercise. It also offers a much better opportunity for people to gather. A much better opportunity for people to gather, and going forward we're going to have far more people in the catchment of Takapuna than there is now. And around Auckland, councillors, there are less and less locations for members of the public to engage for civic gatherings. We're actually selling a lot of those locations off. We're selling off the previous square and council buildings that have existed in the past. So this is incredibly important. The location that was alluded to earlier, where the council offices have been, that's gone. So if we're talking about civic space, this particular space is incredibly important. Potters Park is hugely important. We've already got a significant sunk asset in Potters Park, and the Richard Reid proposal maximises that relationship. It's got far more engagement, and it will allow, fundamentally, the ongoing success of the Takapuna market. And what's significant about the market, it's not a linear market, it's a concentrated market. It's a true market. And I guess my final comment is about a town square. A town square is just that. It's a square. And the reason it has that design, and Jan Gell refers to it, and he refers to a magic size, is because that is the size and shape that has stood through the millennia. It doesn't matter whether it's our culture, whether it's iwi culture, those sorts of sizes and configurations stand the test of time. And those spaces are owned by the community, and the community and the local board have told us, in my view, through submissions and the engagement that I have certainly heard, that they want ownership of the space. They would like more, and this is a compromise, frankly. It's already compromised, but it should not be compromised further.
Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I won't be supporting this. If I was to support this, I would be ignoring the public consultation that we've undertaken. I'd be turning my backs on all that evidence. And the mover puts a lot of weight in listening to the local board. Well, the local board, its job is to listen to its community, but it's been well evident today that the board has actually turned its back on the community. Remember, we're looking at evidence, and I won't repeat that evidence because I think we've all got that. But the evidence that I want to now weight my decision on is the evidence before us. And I'm not going to make opinions up here. I'm not going to make my opinions up because I am not an expert in the evaluation that is required at this stage. We've engaged those technical skills. And if you look at the page that I referred to before, 102 of the attachments, the Isthmus scheme out of 16 wins on 12 counts. The Richard Reid Associates wins on 1 account. And then there are 3 even. Now, it's pretty hands down, in my opinion, and it's even stronger than the public consultation and the public survey. Now, if you look at the other matter which I drew your attention to, the paper of the Urban Design Panel, that is chaired, I think it's the chair is Emeritus Professor John Hunt, used to head up the architecture school, I think. I don't know if he's still doing that. Graham Moller, multiple award winner in architecture. Rebecca Skidmore, Graham McIndoe and Rachel DeLambert. These are people who have a considerable bodies of work sitting in behind them and considerable reputations. Not one, 5 of them. 5 of them. And if you look at what they say, just say about sun, the one area that my colleague on my right, who's vacated, talked about Richard Reid winning on the sun. Well, if you go and look at what they say about the sun, and It's very interesting. And they say that receives sun at all times of the day and throughout the year. Those parts of any public space that receive sun for the whole of the year are unlikely to be inviting for a number of reasons, including their horizontal extent, necessary separation from the built edges of the space, and limited opportunity to engage in the urban life that is inevitably concentrated at the edges of successful spaces. Sunlight is therefore one of a number of factors that must be balanced in the design of public spaces and the built form that defines such spaces. That's from the Urban Design Panel about sun. And they go on to talk about what is it about this European tradition that Richard Reid and Associates proposes. There is no European tradition in Takapuna. It's not there. It is not there in the traditional form of classic squares that you see in Europe. And if you look at the Isthmus proposal or the Isthmus evaluation, they clearly identify of some of these irrational edges and wanderings of spaces. And that is the context. And the Richard Reid Associates totally ignores that context. I'm not just making that up, Chair. It's evident in the Urban Design Panel evaluation. And lastly, if you're not at all convinced, go to other matters. And that's on page 135 of the Urban Design Panel's report. And it says the Richard Reid Associates proposal lacks a strong invitation to enter the Anzac block from the approaching Hurstmere Road. That's fundamental. That's in the unitary plan. It has a lack of a strong invitation entering the Anzac block approaching from Huron Street and the Huron Street car park. That's the opposite direction. And that's what we want. That's what it says in the unitary plan. Lacks that a reflection of the important pedestrian desire line, lacks the building frontages of the town square, lacks connection to Hurstmere Green. The list goes on. And none of that is my opinion. It's all evidence. And let's make our decision based on evidence.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Simpson, you had a question?
The question was to the mover of the amendment. I don't want this to go on and on and on and on. And I wondered, you've asked for a decision in a month's time. I want to make sure that if that amendment went through, that there would be no further discussion.
No, so I took the month as
the
a given.
next E&C meeting.
Yes, and I think that's what the local board said, yeah.
So I've got Councillor Hills again, so that's speaking this time, Councillor. Okay, last time was a question, this is speaking to the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. No, I can't support the amendment. The amendment says agree with the proposal that is against what the community have said through consultation. When we say not listen to the local board came here last term, so did the Kaipātiki local board. Panuku was looking across Auckland at 70 different centres. We were lucky in the North Shore ward to get 2 out of what was 9, now 12, and there's other councillors around this table who are begging to have their area have a development and investment of what we're getting in both Northcote and Takapuna. The board came here and presented and asked Panuku to do this work. The board supported the 2014 centre plan, which asked Panuku to do this work. The local board plan passed by this current local board asked Panuku and others to do this work, ask for homes, for open spaces, for restaurants, workplaces and connections. The board asked for that work. The board then asked for a further consultation. Panuku said it wasn't actually necessary, but Chris and I and all the other councillors here asked again, and Panuku said, look, we can do another consultation after all the feedback they had already said that people wanted a connection from Lake Road down to the beach. So they did another consultation, which got almost 5,500 submissions, and that is almost as much as we got on the annual plan for the whole city. So that's one project. 55% of the submitters supported that. 2,500 people supported the Hurstmere to Lake direction. 400 to 500 people supported the Potters Park. Then the board said, can we please have more connection to Potters Park? The consultation was only a connection across and it did not connect with Potters Park. So then what the Panuku did was then connect what was supported and tried to make it a connection of the two options together. So we have an option 1 with part of option 2 in there already, which is going further. We've been told that the original plan was for 800 square metres. This is 3,200. We're talking about being able to put people together in a space. The current Anzac Day happens on a space of 300 to 400 square metres. This is going to be 3,200 square metres. This also connects to Hurstmere Green. We're spending $12 million on upgrading Hurstmere Road into a space that we can close off for events. It's going down to 1 lane. There's going to be spaces, new lights, new seats, whole area is going to be upgraded. Was born on the shore, lived on the shore my whole life, and nothing in this area, apart from Hurstmere Green, has happened in my as of the weekend, 33 years of living in this area. People tell me over and over again, I thought this was happening ages ago. I thought this has already happened. Why do you keep talking about this? So to push this again, when Panuku have clearly listened and moved further and further, but if we're supporting this, it's completely opposite to what the consultation asked for. So the board asked for the consultation was done. I just don't understand how now we would turn around and support a design that only 8% of the community supported. I'm actually just really unsure of why we're doing this. So I cannot support the amendment. We have to move forward on this and we have to make sure that we get a good outcome for our community.
Councillor, I've got Councillor Sayers, Philippina and Newman. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to speak in support of the amendment, and thank you, Richard, for that input too. That I'm considering that, and I have no issues with the qualifications or the talent of the designers or Panuku and all the good merits in your designs. But my comment would be that today I've seen individuals from the local board rock up here that were anti it at the start, and they've moved, and now they are. So I see that as a sign of goodwill, maturity, compromise. Then I've heard them say today saying that they endorse the development going forward, and that they'd like to have 1 month crack at any refinements that might be possible. So it's not taking away from any of the positive points that the two ward councillors have said on behalf of their areas. It's just another month to see if something can be brought together. I've heard there's goodwill on both sides. I don't know why we wouldn't give that opportunity and goodwill. So I guess in summary, Madam Chair, not to drag it out, I think our committee today could show some goodwill and just extend this for 1 month, and there may be a change and a positive outcome, or there may not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Philippina.
Thank you, Chair. We are all dreaming if we think that this is the last of any discussion in regards to Takapuna. We are dreaming because there won't be, even if we have this month. We're dreaming. Councillor Walker ended up asking questions of Kate in regards to Richard Reid, the one that we've got, and I heard your responses, and I thank you for being honest in regards to your responses, Kate, because in some of them they said no, there wouldn't be a better option with Richard Reid. So we're poles apart in regards to that. I will not be supporting this amendment. And look, I'm not going to go over what both the councillors for the area have said, because it's left up to them. But I will, however, finish with this, and that is the comment that Matua Brown said at his closing when he gets questioned, which was kia kaha tātou, which is be strong, all of us. We are nearly there. So I will not be supporting this amendment. It's just another delay tactic. And Chair, as I said when I asked my questions, I honestly do not see this being decided on before the election. it won't be decided upon. And this is why we need to make the decision. So that's what I'm supporting, the substantive and not the amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Kia ora matua. Councillor Newman.
I think firstly, B, I think that you need to put Te Takapuna local board because that's the organisation's position that just needs to be reflected. I think that the issue here, and look, I'm happy to go along with the amendment. The issue here is it would have been helpful if we'd actually had the Richard Reid and Associates report. I think we've had a review of the proposal, but it's extraordinary, Chair. I actually think that the two most critical items that we've heard from today have been Lydia Sasene and Angela Dalton, and we've spent a very, very short time, really, by comparison, listening to them, whereas I'm not quite sure how long we've been going on this. The one thing that I would say, it's very, very reasonable to take the time here, is that once you make these changes, that's it, and the development is a rather final one. So I think that there has been quite a lot of movement to date, and that is a useful thing. But because the Reid report, I'm not sure, has been fully socialised and understood, maybe if B and C could be taken separately, I will be voting for the amendments, but I think that it's easier, I think, to defer as opposed to agree in principle with a position that you're not actually fully aware of the full position, given that you haven't necessarily seen the Richard Reid report in the agenda, although it has been, it's information that has been made available to that local board, and if you can trawl back through their papers, you can track it there.
I'll be brief, Madam Chair. What the amendment is seeking is simply a little extra time to try and build a consensus. This has gone on for a long time. It's divided the community, in some ways almost embittered the community against the council and Panuku. We have the local board's consistent position backed by a massive 8,500 signature petition. It shouldn't be dismissed. It shouldn't be brushed aside. In terms of democracy, we need to take the local board backed by this petition seriously. I do note that the two sides have moved somewhat together, and I think with the help of Richard Reid, and again, I have to support Councillor Newman here, it would have been very, very helpful if we meant to make an evidence-based decision here that Mr. Reid should have been here to also answer questions. But his reputation is outstanding, and he's a person widely respected in this community and across New Zealand. So that's disappointing. We have the choice here of voting the amendment down and pushing aside any chance to build a consensus, or go for the all too frequent zero-sum approach, the win-lose approach, the winner-takes-all approach, where the council and Panuku win again and the community lose again, and there'll be consequences for that. There are consequences for that sort of behaviour in regard to the image and the reputation of the super city, which we all know, we all must know, is not good, which is why nowhere else in New Zealand is there any appetite to emulate this reform. Here's a chance for us then to put that aside and try and heal the community, try and build a consensus, express goodwill, as Councillor Sayers has put it, and try and heal this problem and get a result that most people can buy into, that has the sign-off of someone of the reputation of Mr. Reid. That's the choice, Either we push aside, ignore the opportunity, the last chance to try and build a consensus, or we just bulldoze ahead in the usual fashion. And it is a democracy, and in the end there will be consequences for that sort of behaviour. I urge us to take the consensual route. Thank you.
You want to move the motion be put? That's a procedural motion. We will need to take that. I'll put the recommendation, all those in favour that the motion be put. Those, I'm seconding it. I'm happy to second. No, this is, Linda is wanting the amendment be put. We've had 3 speakers for, 3 speakers against. Just making sure people know what we're doing. Okay. So, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? People are happy to do that. So now, just to make sure everyone knows what we're voting on. So we're voting on the amendment. The request has been made that we take B and C separately. So I'll put by division. Okay, all good. We're by divisioning it. So we'll do B, and then we'll do the rounds, and then we'll do C.
Yeah. Okay. Voting on the amendment 14B, Councillor Bartley. Member Wilcox.
We're just doing B.
B.
So we're just doing read B.
No? Member Brown?
No.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore?
No.
Councillor Clow?
No.
Councillor Cooper? Councillor Darby?
Against.
Councillor Filipina?
Against.
Councillor Fletcher?
For.
Councillor Hills? Councillor Mike Lee?
Aye.
Councillor Newman?
For.
Councillor Sayers?
For.
Councillor Simpson? Councillor Wayne Walker?
Yes.
Councillor Watson?
Yes.
Councillor Young?
Walker's the other
way. Oh, sorry.
It's Walker.
That for you? Councillor House?
No.
Lost.
So we'll do B. I mean
So
C.
C.
We'll do the second part of the amendment, which is C, and I presume by division again.
Right, give me 1 second. Councillor Bartley? No. Member Wilcox?
No.
Member Brown?
No.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore?
No.
Councillor Clow?
No.
Councillor Cooper?
No.
Councillor Darby?
Against.
Councillor Filipina?
Against.
Councillor Fletcher?
For.
Councillor Hills? Councillor Mike Lee?
Aye.
Councillor Newman?
For.
Councillor Sayers?
For.
Councillor Simpson? Councillor Wayne Walker?
Yes.
Councillor Watson?
Yes.
Councillor Young?
Which one was complete? No.
Chair?
No.
Which one?
Member Wilcox. No.
No. 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Lost.
So I think we might have talked ourselves to a standstill. Are people happy that we just go to the substantive? Okay, let's vote on the substantive motions as they are on your as they are on your paper, and we'll do that by division.
Councillor Bartley? Member Wilcox? Member Brown?
For.
Deputy Mayor Cashmore?
Yes.
Councillor Clow?
Yes.
Councillor Cooper? Councillor Darby? Councillor Filipina? Councillor Fletcher? Councillor Hills? Councillor Mike Lee?
No.
Councillor Newman? Councillor Sayers?
Against.
Councillor Simpson? Councillor Wayne Walker? Councillor Watson? Councillor Young? Chair?
Aye.
Carried.
Okay, thank you all. And thank you to everyone who has hung out until this time.